Welcome to the frozen silence of December 1950. The kind of cold that swallows sound, steals breath, and turns steel into glass. Somewhere inside that white abyss called the Chosin Reservoir. Northeastern Korea, 30 miles from the Yalu River. A man tore open a letter from home not to read it, but to survive. The flame rose only an inch, maybe less, a trembling spark against 40 degrees below. And for a heartbeat, the paper glowed orange words dissolving into warmth, memory turning to smoke. They say no one remembers his name, only that the snow where he knelt stayed black for a moment longer than the rest. The wind screamed through broken trucks, canvas snapping like gunfire, and bodies moved slower than time. Every breath crystallized before it left the mouth. Every sound, every heartbeat, every prayer froze midair and fell like glass dust on the ice. It wasn't a battle anymore, it was an erasure. White ground, white sky, white death. And yet inside that colorless void, someone carried color blue ink on thin paper. A letter written by a wife who still believed the mail could find him. He held it for 6 days, unread, untouched, because it meant home. Until home had to burn. In that instant, history blinked. 65,000 men trapped between mountains and silence. Engines seized. Blood froze before it reached the snow. The reservoir wasn't just water. It was a mirror reflecting the faces of men who realized warmth was no longer a feeling, but a memory. When rescue convoys finally reached them, the letters were gone, ashes mixed with rations, handwriting turned to soot on their gloves. Someone found one half-page wedged inside a rifle stock. The garden is quiet now, and nothing after. No name, no town. Only that unfinished line, the only thing that ever thawed in that place. Picture it, the blizzard erasing footprints faster than they're made. Picture headlights swallowed whole by snow curtains. A sergeant shouting orders that vanish in the wind before anyone hears them. And then the crack of paper catching fire, soft, private, almost holy. That sound carried further than any command. For a second, the men around him stopped moving, watching the glow dance on his face, and one whispered, "Save it. Save it for when we get out." He didn't answer. The letter was already gone, and all that remained was the warmth on his hands. Then even that disappeared. Historians would later call Chosin a retreat. Those who were there called it a march of frozen souls. But somewhere between those phrases lies the truth, not written in reports, but in ashes that drifted south with the wind. That single act, a man burning the last letter from home, became its own kind of prayer. It asked no forgiveness, demanded no glory, only one more heartbeat of heat. The mountains remembered. When spring came, locals said the ice melted unevenly, small circles of darker water, as if tiny suns had been buried beneath. Some believed those were the places where letters had burned. Others said it was where men knelt and spoke to ghosts. Either way, the warmth returned, but not for long. The cold always wins, except when memory catches fire. And that's where we begin, with a piece of paper that outlived the men who wrote and read it, a story pulled from a half-burned envelope archived in a forgotten supply crate found decades later in a museum that still smells faintly of kerosene and frost. The handwriting faded, but the scorch marks remain curved like fingerprints, like proof that someone once fought the cold with words. Before we go further, take a second. Pause the screen, look at your hands, imagine they can't feel warmth. Now imagine the only thing between you and the end of everything is a letter from someone you love, and the knowledge that its ink could save your life for 10 seconds more. Would you burn it? Would you read it first? Would you try to do both at once? Before we begin, leave a comment where you're watching from, and the exact time you paused, because that's the heartbeat of this story, the moment when survival and love share the same flame. When memory becomes fire, and fire becomes goodbye. This is Chosin Reservoir 1950, the last letter that warmed the cold, and the silence that followed still hasn't ended. December 1950. The 38th parallel is behind them, the Yalu River ahead, and the world shrinks to a circle of frost and flame. The Chosin Reservoir lies high in the mountains of North Korea, a mirror of ice stretching 20 miles long, surrounded by ridges that cut the sky into shards. The 1st Marine Division and attached army units move along a single narrow road that coils like a frozen vein through the mountains east to west, through Toktong Pass. Hagururi Kotori, names that will one day sound like prayers whispered through clenched teeth. The temperature drops to -40. Diesel turns solid. Metal cracks. Rifle bolts freeze shut. Men breathe steam until the air itself feels alive, clawing at their lungs. The silence of the reservoir is broken only by engines' dying boots crunching on powder, and the distant echo of bugles that do not belong to them. The enemy has already closed the circle. Tens of thousands of Chinese troops descend from the hills, invisible until they scream horns, whistles, drums, a sound that ricochets off the cliffs like ghosts calling for debt. Every flare paints the snow blood red. The Marines fire until the barrels glow, then freeze again when the glow fades. They move, halt, move again. No one talks about victory. Only distance, how far to Haguru, how far to Koto, how far to the sea. Inside that chain of retreat, a man carries a letter folded in oilcloth tucked against his chest. It has survived every patrol, every night in the ice trenches. He has not read it, maybe because reading means remembering, and remembering means pain. Or maybe because the ink is already smudged, blurred by the sweat and frost of hands that never stay warm long enough to open it. At the command post, a kerosene lamp fights the wind leaking through torn canvas. The officer of the watch keeps a notebook open. Coordinates ammunition casualties. The pencil lad breaks every few words. He sharpens it with his knife, each scrape a heartbeat in the silence. Outside, the world keeps collapsing inward. Trucks overloaded with wounded crawl down the frozen trail. One slips, slides off the edge, vanishes into the white. No one looks back. There is no time to look back. They drag sleds of ammunition with ropes tied around their waists like beasts of burden. And every hour someone stops moving, not dramatically, not with a scream, just stops, sits down, exhales, and becomes another shape in the snow. In a nearby foxhole, the man with the letter finally pulls it free. The paper is stiff edges rimed with frost. He tries to unfold it, but it cracks the fibers frozen together. He breathes on it, hoping his breath can melt something. The first line appears faintly. "My darling, I hope this finds you in warmth." He almost laughs. The wind steals the sound. There is no warmth left anywhere except in memory. He looks at the lamp, the blue flame flickering low, and thinks of how much fuel they have left, almost none. The ink on the letter gleams as if it knows what's coming. He hesitates. The page trembles between his fingers. Another shell bursts far away, shaking loose a curtain of snow from the canvas. In that moment, he decides. He lowers the letter toward the lamp. The flame hesitates, then accepts. Outside, the cold stirs again. Men crouch beside barrels filled with rags and gasoline hands, extended faces hollowed. Some talk about Thanksgiving dinners they missed. Others just stare at their boots frozen stiff like armor. A chaplain moves among them, murmuring prayers, half lost in the wind. He bends to warm his hands and finds a scrap of burned paper caught in the drift, one word still legible: home. He tucks it into his Bible. That night he will write in his diary. The cold was a living thing. It devoured letters before men could finish reading them. Farther up the ridge, correspondents record what they can. Cameras jam film cracks in the reels. The few photos that survive show faces that look carved, eyes glassy and distant, not dead, but suspended between frost and faith. The army calls it withdrawal. The men call it the long walk out. Each mile costs blood, frostbite, memory. Each step feels borrowed from someone else's life. And yet they move one frozen miracle at a time. Later, after the war, historians will reconstruct numbers, divisions, regiments, degrees below zero, but they will never reconstruct that sound, the hiss of a letter turning to ash inside a tin cup. The man who burned it will not make it to the coast. He will vanish somewhere near Toktong Pass, buried by the same snow that once reflected the fire he made. When they recover his pack months later, they find nothing but a brass lighter and a half-melted bullet. The ashes of the letter are gone, carried by wind, maybe scattered across miles of mountain, maybe absorbed into the ice itself. In the small hours before dawn, the survivors begin to march again. The wind presses against them like a wall. Frost clings to eyelashes, to breath, to the corners of memory. They walk past what used to be a camp tent's shredded rifles stuck upright in the snow like crosses. Someone has scratched words into a frozen crate with a bayonet. Keep moving. They obey. The only warmth left is the friction of boots against ice. Somewhere behind them, the burned letter continues to glow in the dark of their minds, a candle no one can blow out. The sun rises weakly over the reservoir, a pale coin behind curtains of mist. It gives no heat, only light enough to see the path ahead. Trucks roar engines, groaning men shouting directions that vanish in the wind. Every mile is a negotiation between life and cold. Every stop risks never starting again. The radio crackles voices, fading coordinates, repeating like prayers: hold, move, hold, move. And over all of it, the silence of the mountains, ancient, indifferent, absolute. By nightfall, the reservoir is quiet again. The tracks fill with snow. The echoes fade. The cold resets the world to zero. Only a faint trail of smoke rises where the letter burned, a thin thread connecting the living to the remembered, the present, to the warmth that once was. Somewhere out there, under layers of ice, the story waits, the kind of story that refuses to die because it was written in both ink and fire. It is waiting to be read again, not with eyes, but with breath, with the small warmth that memory gives when everything else has turned to frost. In the archives of Quantico, inside a temperature-controlled room, where the air hums like memory itself, there lies a gray folder marked Chosin 1950. Personal effects. The ink has faded to brown. The corners curl upward like frost lifting from steel. Inside are the items recovered from a frozen valley: a lighter, a rusted dog tag, and a half sheet of paper charred at the edges. The handwriting leans slightly to the right, confident American mid-century cursive. The words are almost gone, but one line still survives beneath the soot. My darling, I hope this finds you in warmth. The archivist calls it Artifact 271B. The label beneath reads simply, found near Toktong Pass. No name, no unit, no home address, just coordinates and silence. The official reports tell their version with numbers. 2 divisions encircled by 6 Chinese armies. 25,000 men caught in sub-zero blizzards. 16 days of fighting, 24 hours of darkness. The Marine record calls it a strategic withdrawal, a phrase that hides more than it reveals. In declassified dispatches, phrases recur: frostbite casualties exceed expectation. Fuel exhausted, morale variable. Each line typed by hands shaking not from fear, but from the cold that settled inside the flesh. Radios froze. Morphine froze. Blood transfusions turned solid in the tubes. And still commands went out. Advance to Hagururi. Hold position. Destroy classified material. Some of those classified materials were letters from home. Paper burned easier than rations. One witness, Corporal David L. Mason, wrote in his field notebook, later donated to the Marine Corps Museum. A letter is worth 10 degrees of warmth. We read them in our heads, then feed them to the stove. Another survivor. Private First Class Eugene Holt remembered something else entirely. I couldn't burn mine. I kept it in my boot till it turned to pulp. When I got to the ship, it fell apart in my hands. Both men spoke 50 years later in interviews transcribed by the Veterans History Project. Their voices crack in the recordings, not from age but from the cold that never quite left their lungs. They talk about silence, about light that had no color, about seeing men walk into the snow as if answering a call only they could hear. The fact layer is patient. It does not rush. It lists, cross-checks, calculates. Supply manifests show that on December 5th, the division's fuel reserve was measured at 12 gallons per company, enough for one night of minimal heat. Rations: 2 cans of beans, 1 chocolate bar per man. They say the wind still speaks around Toktong Pass, a low moan that climbs the valley after midnight, carrying syllables no radio can decode. The locals call it the breathing mountain. Climbers claim that when the ice cracks, it sounds like paper tearing, as if some unseen hand keeps opening the same letter again and again, never finishing the reading. Scientists note it as pressure fractures. Veterans call it memory. Either way, the sound returns every December the month when the reservoir froze and time stopped taking attendance. At the Quantico archive, the curators record a strange pattern. Each winter, condensation appears inside the sealed glass of artifact 271b, tiny drops, forming only over the half-burned words, "I hope this finds you in warmth." Dehumidifiers run 24 hours, yet the fog returns precise as handwriting. One technician swore he smelled kerosene, though the vault forbids fuel. Another said he felt heat on the glass when he leaned too close. The logbook lists it clinically thermal anomaly, ILS 2 degrees C above ambient, but between those numbers hides a whisper the past still breathes. Stories travel faster than facts. At reunions, the old men speak of the letter light. They say it follows convoys along the road to Hagururi, a pale orange glow flickering across drifts, no source, no smoke. It appears when the temperature falls below -30 and vanishes when someone speaks the word home. Younger Marines laugh. Older ones stare at their coffee. A chaplain once brought a field recorder. The tape captured nothing but wind, then in the hiss between gusts, a human breath saying softly, "Keep moving." In a village south of the lake, a teacher keeps a drawer of old envelopes. She tells students the wind delivers them blank, brittle edges burned. Children slide them under lamps to see if ink reappears. Sometimes faint blue lines emerge. December. My darling, the garden is quiet now. The words fade again by morning. No postmarks, no return address, only the smell of cold iron. She mails them each year to the Marine Corps Museum. They never arrive. The courier companies lose them somewhere between Seoul and Busan. Yet every January, another envelope waits on her windowsill. Travelers describe the reservoir as too silent. Cameras malfunction, batteries drain in minutes. Guides warn never to camp near the frozen shore. The ground remembers fire, they say. Some nights the ice glows from beneath, as if lit by coals. The scientific survey teams record methane pockets. The locals leave offerings, folded letters, weighted with stones. The paper burns slowly, though no flame touches it, curling inward, like it wants to return to the shape of the first one. Folklore feeds on what history omits. The official record ends with coordinates. The oral record begins with a heartbeat. A Korean farmer once told a journalist that his father found metal fragments after the thaw, a dog tag fused to a lighter, the letters DM. He kept it in a jar of kerosene. Each winter the fuel level dropped, though the lid was sealed. "It drinks the cold," the old man said. When the reporter returned years later, both jar and man were gone, leaving only a ring of melted frost on the shelf. Every legend needs a witness who doesn't believe. In 1987, an American filmmaker visited the site for a documentary. He dismissed the ghost stories until his crew's thermal cameras showed a plume of heat on the snow shaped exactly like a hand. The frame lasted half a second. He tried to replay it. The film burned in the projector. He stored the remaining reels in a hotel locker. The next morning, the locker key was too hot to touch. He never finished the film, but in interviews he admitted one thing. Something out there keeps rewriting light. The motif spreads heat inside cold fire, inside silence. Psychologists call it Chosin syndrome, survivors reporting warmth during extreme frostbite, hearing voices that guide them downhill. One veteran said the voice told him, "It's not the fire that saves you, it's remembering what burned." He lived to 91, kept a candle by his bed, never lit it. When he died, the wick was already blackened. Archivists debate whether folklore contaminates history. Yet the deeper they catalog, the more coincidences multiply. Weather sensors at the reservoir, spiking each December 3rd, same hour the retreat began. Visitors' cameras overexposing when aimed at the snow ridge called Letter Hill. A field team once placed a thermal probe in the ice. For 10 minutes, the reading rose steadily. The data file names itself home.txt. The probe shut off. Power supply, normal logs intact. No explanation offered. By now, the last letter has crossed from history into myth. Veterans' families leave notes beside the museum display. "Tell him we remember. Keep them warm." Each spring, the archivist removes them, but by winter the glass is fogged again, words ghosting through condensation, as if the exhibit answers back. When visitors breathe on the case, the soot lettering becomes momentarily legible. Find me in warmth, then vanishes. Security footage shows no tampering. Only the rise of temperature, human or otherwise. And still, every December, someone reports seeing a single spark drift over the frozen water, too small for a flare, too steady for a reflection. Pilots spot it from above, fishermen from below. They call it the ember. The mountain wind carries a scent of ink and smoke. The snow tastes faintly of ash. In the quiet after the gusts, a line returns, always the same, my darling. The rest lost to the cold. Some say it's just weather. Others say it's the moment when memory resists extinction, the brief flare where history and soul overlap. Maybe the letter never stopped burning. Maybe it burns forever, one heartbeat at a time, keeping the mountain alive. And when the wind rises, it reads aloud what the world tried to forget, not for the dead, but for the living still searching for warmth. In 2002, a winter survey team from the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency arrived at the northern rim of Chosin Reservoir. The mission file called it Recovery Operation Charlie Toktong. They carried ground-penetrating radar thermal probes and satellite coordinates mapped from old marine reports. The snow came early that year, same week, same temperature as 1950. When the first scan returned, the monitors showed a faint pocket of heat beneath 3 meters of ice. No fire, no movement, just warmth where none should exist. The lead archaeologist, Major Reeves, noted it in his log, thermal anomaly persistent. Approx, diameter 2 meters, possible buried wreck. They began to dig. The ice was glass-hard layers of seasons compressed into silence. Every strike of the pickaxe echoed like gunfire. After 6 hours, they hit metal, the lid of an ammunition crate bent and sealed with rust. Inside were fragments of uniform cloth, a melted lighter, and a folded half-sheet of paper sealed in wax. The paper was black around the edges, faint handwriting still visible in blue ink. The words barely legible read, "The garden is quiet now," the same line preserved in Artifact 271B. Reeves stared at the coordinates again. It matched the grid square listed in the 1950 after-action report, where Corporal David L. Mason's unit went missing. He radioed base, "We may have found the origin." Back at the field tent, the team cataloged every item by temperature. The waxed paper registered -15 degrees, yet when placed on the table, a ring of condensation formed beneath it. The meteorologist dismissed it as surface friction. The medic placed a gloved hand above the sheet, said he felt a pulse of heat, as if the air itself sighed. The recorder caught a soft hiss, wind curling through the torn fabric of the tent, and inside that hiss a breath that resembled a voice, "Keep moving." Reeves didn't log it. He wrote instead, "Audio interference, possible frequency overlap." Still, he kept the paper close stored between 2 sheets of glass. In Seoul, the lab dated the ink to early November 1950. The wax was consistent with military sealing compound used in field rations. Chemical analysis revealed traces of kerosene and human skin oil, proof it had been handled while burning. The archivists confirmed the handwriting matched Mason's field notebook found decades earlier. That made no sense. Mason's notebook was discovered 20 miles south at Hagaruri. 2 artifacts, same hand, separated by terrain and time. Reeves requested cross-testing. The report returned 3 days later. Identical pen pressure, same ink, differing burn pattern. The letter seemed to have burned twice. The discovery reached Quantico in spring 2003. Curators placed it beside Artifact 271B under identical climate control. Within a week, sensors detected both cases warming by 2 degrees each night between midnight and Iwahon Hajaro, cooling before dawn. Cameras recorded faint mist along the glass, no condensation elsewhere in the vault. Reeves flew in to verify. When he approached the display, the mist thickened. Under his breath, he said, "David Mason." The humidity meter spiked. The letters on the burned paper darkened for a moment, enough to reveal one more line unseen before. "If warmth ever returns, remember why you lit the flame." That night, Reeves opened the 1950 field reports again. Entry 12-4 listed fuel shortage, frostbite casualties, order to retreat. At 23:40, Mason's squad lost radio contact. The final transmission from their sector read, "Holding position, keeping warm." Historians long assumed it referred to campfires. Now the recovered note suggested something else, that keeping warm was literal, desperate, human. The curator entered an addendum. Recovered correspondence indicates soldiers used personal letters for heat during final night at Toktong Pass. The war, once a line of coordinates, had become handwriting. News of the find reached surviving veterans. At a reunion in San Diego, a gray-haired Marine touched the photo of the artifact and whispered, "We all did it. We burned home." No one contradicted him. Reeves listened, recording every story. Patterns emerged, the same phrase repeated. The light lasted longer than it should have. He realized the reports were not superstition, but testimony. Something in that valley, in that precise longitude, defied measurement. Perhaps trapped methane, perhaps memory itself releasing heat. He returned to Chosin a year later. The snowfields looked unchanged, same ridges, same hollow silence. He carried the replica of the burned letter in his chest pocket, a gesture more ritual than protocol. At sunset, he placed it on the ice and stood back. The temperature gauge in his hand flickered upward by 1 degree. Wind passed through the valley, and for a heartbeat, it sounded like fabric catching flame. Reeves whispered, "You're home." The wind stopped. The gauge steadied. A faint shimmer like heat above asphalt hovered over the letter, then vanished. He sealed the gauge, logged optical illusion, and walked away. Weeks later in Quantico, the archivist noticed something new. Both original artifacts, the half-burned letter and the newly recovered fragment, showed synchronized discoloration, as if exposed to identical light at identical time. No ultraviolet source detected. The readings occurred. December 3rd, 11th, 47 p.m. Same timestamp. Mason's final transmission ended 53 years earlier. The archive log closed with one line, "Event correlation, unresolved file retained under code warmth sequence." Reeves never claimed a haunting. In interviews, he said only this: "Sometimes the cold keeps its own record." But each winter he returned quietly to the reservoir, placed a small candle on the frozen shore, and let it burn until the wind took it. No monuments, no speeches, just a flicker repeating what Mason had done half a century before. And for a moment, the ice seemed to breathe again, not with fire but with memory, the last warmth the war ever knew. The wind rises again. It starts as a whisper across the ridge, then builds into the same hollow roar recorded on every mission tape since 1950. Reeves stands alone beside the frozen lake snow, spiraling like ash around him. He switches on his field recorder. The screen glows orange in the dark, the same color that once lit a dying camp half a century earlier. Static fills the channel, then a pulse, faint but rhythmic, matching the archived Morse bursts from Mason's radio log. 3 short, 3 long, SOS, but there is a fourth beat, a pause, then one last pulse. The code for home. He doesn't move. The sound grows louder, echoing from the cliffs, until it's no longer wind, but the crack of rifles, engines, coughing men shouting through frozen air. Voices overlap, fragments of reports, prayers, coordinates. He can't tell whether the mountain is remembering or replaying. The cold bites through his gloves, yet the recorder in his hand grows hot. On its screen, the thermal graph flares red. Beneath his boots, the ice vibrates, not breaking, but humming as if something below is alive. A light appears beneath the surface, not reflection, not flare. It spreads in a circle, 2 meters wide, glowing from under the ice, steady and silent. Reeves kneels, camera trembling, breath fogging the lens. Inside the halo, faint shapes shimmer, letters drifting like smoke under glass. He wipes the lens. They're still there, arranged in a curve. The last letter that warmed the cold. The phrase moves, then dissolves into water. He stumbles back, hits record again, but the display freezes. Temperature reading -40 outside, +1 beneath. Impossible. He speaks softly into the mic. "If you can hear me, I'm listening." For a heartbeat, everything stops, the wind, the echo, even the snow. Then a sound answers, soft as breathing, "Keep moving." The recorder shuts itself off. Reeves drags air into his lungs, tasting metal. The warmth fades, replaced by silence so heavy it bends his knees. He realizes the circle of light beneath the ice isn't melting. It's refreezing from the edges, inward sealing itself. Whatever reached through has gone back under. He marks the coordinates N40 E 127 Fiton's exact position of Mason's last known post. He returns to camp, shaking hands, numb face raw. The team crowds the tent. Instruments blink with erratic data pressure, spikes, temperature jumps. On every screen, the same timestamp flashes, 2347 HRs, December 3rd. The radio suddenly crackles to life, broadcasting an ancient call sign, Fox Company, Ridge 31. Reeves recognizes it from the 1950 logbook. No transmitter on their frequency. The comms officer stares. "It's not us, sir." They listen as the static forms words, holding position, keeping warm. Then silence. Reeves closes the set, whispers. Message received. Morning brings clarity or the illusion of it. The data drives show nothing abnormal. The recorder file labeled pulse.wave won't open. Its size reads 0 bytes. The only surviving note is a thermal still, a faint human silhouette kneeling on the ice surrounded by a halo of heat. No one in the team remembers standing there. The photograph timestamps itself at the same minute Mason's squad vanished. Reeves sends it to Quantico. The reply arrives weeks later. Image degradation. Subject indeterminate. Possible reflection. He knows it wasn't reflection. He leaves the field station that evening. Snow drifts follow him down the pass, whispering against the canvas like paper. Each gust carries the smell of burnt ink. He recalls the line Mason wrote before disappearing. "If warmth ever returns, remember why you lit the flame." For 50 years, men chased warmth in that valley and found only cold. Tonight, the warmth found them. Reeves feels it again, not on his skin, but inside his chest, a pressure rising until it hurts. He pulls the replica letter from his coat, holds it up to the starlight. The ink darkens, revealing one more hidden line. "The fire was never mine alone. The stars shimmer through the frost haze. Far below the reservoir glows faintly a mirror of black glass." He imagines the men of 1950 still marching under it, frozen silhouettes walking through time carrying letters that never reached home. Each spark of light beneath the ice is one of them, brief, defiant human. The wind howls again, looping through valleys like breath through lungs. Reeves raises his voice above it. "You made it home." The echo answers not words, just warmth spreading outward, the sound of snow melting. At 2347, the sensors in camp record one final surge. The lake temperature rises 2 degrees, then stabilizes. All equipment shuts down as if exhaling. The field generator burns out not from frost, but from heat. In the dark, the men gather outside, staring at the horizon. A thin orange line flickers above the ice, dancing, shrinking, gone. No one speaks. Reeves removes his glove, presses his palm to the snow. It feels alive, trembling warmer than his skin. He keeps it there until the numbness lifts. Then he writes in his log, warmth confirmed. Source unknown. Witnessed by 12. Weeks later, back at Quantico, the archivists display the new photograph beside the 2 letters. 3 pieces of evidence, one from the past, one from the ice, one from the lens. Together they form a sequence, ink firelight. Visitors pass by, unaware that the glass casing hums faintly when the temperature drops. Reeves stands at the edge of the exhibit, watching condensation bloom across the surface, spelling out a shape like a signature DLM. He doesn't blink. The fog fades. The glass is cold again. Outside the museum, snow begins to fall, soft, soundless, endless, just like that first night in 1950. Somewhere far away, wind sweeps over Chosin Reservoir, whispering across frozen ridges, the same phrase caught on every tape for 70 years, keep moving, keep warm. The echo stretches through time, carrying what science can't record, the memory of a single flame that refused to die. And in that silence between the cold and the warmth, history breathes one last time. The ice melted once, then froze again. When spring reached Chosin, the lake turned gray and quiet, hiding everything but memory. Decades later, they found what remained, buttons, tags, fragments of handwriting burned at the edges. The men were gone, yet their warmth kept resurfacing. as if the mountains still remembered their breath. Inside the Quantico Museum, the letter rests under glass. Visitors lean close, fogging the surface with their breath. Sometimes the fog lingers, sometimes the temperature rises by a single degree. Curators record it, erase it, record again. The numbers never explain the silence that follows. Each December, the sensors hum at 23:47, the same minute Mason's transmission ended. The cold remembers more than people do. Reeves no longer returns to Korea. He says the mountain doesn't need him. But every year, he lights a candle at his window and waits until the flame bends east toward the reservoir. He watches it tremble and fade, knowing that warmth was never about heat, but about remembering why you lit the fire. Some call it haunting. Some call it science. Maybe it's both, the echo between fact and feeling, where history breathes for a moment before freezing again. The letter survives not because it escaped the cold, but because it taught the cold how to hold warmth. Maybe they didn't disappear, maybe we did. Because the cold didn't erase them, it preserved the last warmth they made. And every time the wind moves across that mountain, the letter burns again. You've just listened to another file from Classified Chronicles, where history whispers through the cold. If you want to uncover more forgotten stories like this one, subscribe and keep the light burning.